Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're just going to take a minute or two here and let people come on in. We have about 30 people that were in the waiting room here, so we're going to give it just a minute here. All right, welcome, everybody. We're going to get started here. And my name is Michael Ratajczak. I'm the program director for the Center for Business Analytics at St. Mary's University. Today, we're here with Gina, Executive Director, Data and Analytics Technology at Wells Fargo. Her presentation is Mastering Data Storytelling, Presenting Data Effectively. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing at a later date as well. At the end of tonight's event, there will be a short survey, and we appreciate you taking a few moments to provide your valuable feedback, which will help us identify future programming and events, etc. We'd also like to acknowledge that this event is being hosted by the Center for Business Analytics at St. Mary's, made possible through generous support of businesses and alumni. If you are interested in supporting our continued work and continuing to bring programming out to everybody, you can reach us at CBA, so Center for Business Analytics, but abbreviated, CBA, at smumn.edu. So thanks again for being here. We look forward to a great session here. Again, we are doing these monthly, if not twice a month. We are planning for a November one, which is going to be excellent, and also one in December. Again, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Gina.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Gina Threinen, and tonight we are going to talk about the process of giving a presentation with data. My hope is that my experiences over my 25 years of working across marketing, technology, and data can help you when you have to give your next presentation with data. Next slide, please. All right. So before we begin, let me just give you an intro of how I got here. I started my career over 20 years ago in marketing, and that marketing career has led me into data and analytics because as a marketing practitioner, I needed to measure my marketing campaigns. And if you think back 20 years ago and what was happening at that time, digital marketing was just taking off. So software and marketing technology tools were just coming out and enabling the ability for marketers to measure campaigns. This led me into really getting into the data and analytics side. It was really fun and rewarding to be able to see how well your marketing was working and how it was bringing in new customers for growth for the company. It also taught me a lot about technology too, because I had to understand how these marketing tools work together and how they integrate with one another. So if we were doing an email campaign, for example, how could I connect those numbers coming from our email campaigns to our website traffic, let's say, and then connect it to our sales team database when a new lead came in. So there were all these new use cases and things we could do. It was a really exciting time to be in marketing. Today, I get to bring all of that together as I now build data and analytics technology products, and I roll those out across enterprises. I've also been teaching at St. Mary's for the past 7.5 years. So how did I get into teaching? About 8 years ago, Michael, and I connected via LinkedIn. We scheduled a call to chat. He told me about this new master's degree program he was building and was asking about my experience working with data and leading analytics teams. We were kind of just brainstorming on what this program would look like, what was going on in the industry at the time, what were companies looking for, what skill sets were needed. And that's kind of what led me to build this course. At that time, I said, the biggest gap I keep seeing over and over again is that companies don't have enough employees who have the skill set of being able to create insights. They've basically been doing reporting all their career. And so what we really need are people who can analyze the data and create insights. Just filling out an Excel report with numbers and creating some nice looking charts and graphs isn't really data analytics. So at that time, I was working with a lot of marketing analytics teams, and I needed them to analyze marketing campaign data and interpret what they see. And then they had to go back to the marketing stakeholders to tell them what was happening so they could adjust their marketing strategy and adjust their marketing spend for their budget. And at that time, what analysts were mostly doing is just, sending out those Excel reports, maybe creating some dashboards, sending it to the marketers, and leaving it up to them to interpret. And a couple of things would usually happen. One, no one used it. No one really looked at it. People were busy, or they were just, they just didn't use it. Two, if they did use it, they would interpret it incorrectly and come to the wrong conclusion. Or three, they would interpret it, but with their own bias, right? So let's say someone in marketing wants, more money in their budget for a particular campaign or a particular marketing channel. So they would dig through the data to come up with something that would support their point of view and maybe take it a little bit out of context or just have a different interpretation of it. So that was really the catalyst for the course that we developed called Communication and Content Strategies. And I've been honored to be able to create the course, and I've been teaching it now for over 7 years. So that's a little about me and my background. So let's dive into what it's like in real life giving a presentation with data. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, today in my career, day-to-day, my work is building new data and technology platforms and products where I get to blend my background in marketing, data, analytics, and technology. I build data and analytics products. I roll them out across an organization. I have to gain adoption of use of those products. And then I have to report back to my stakeholders on the product success. So I really have 3 different audiences that I speak to. One are executives, right? I've got to go to them. I've got to ask for funding. I've got to convince them that we need this new product, this new technology tool. I've got end users of the product, or my peers. I have to convince them they need to use the product. And then I have my stakeholders. And these are people that, I've got to report back to on the metrics of success and the KPIs, and to show them and prove to them that this new, software product or tool is working. So today I'm going to take you through the process of getting ready for a presentation and share with you some of the things I've learned along the way and tips to help you nail your next presentation with data. So the first concept we're going to dive into is really the most important part, but often overlooked, and that is your audience. Next slide, please. So this is step 1 of preparing your presentation to stakeholders when you're going to be presenting data. You have to consider your audience. It's not enough for me to simply just name who my audience is. I have to go the step further to consider their preferences, their background knowledge of the topic, their motivations, what keeps them up at night. Because I often have different audiences I speak to, so depending on where I'm at in my product life cycle with the product being developed or rolled out, and depending on who I'm talking to, I need to identify who is my primary audience. So if I'm presenting to my peers, I'll use familiar language. It's probably okay to use things like acronyms or department terms or anything they're familiar with. If I'm presenting to my stakeholders, I must be well informed and show that I've done my homework. My recommendations must be clear and precise, and I'll usually put in an appendix with the detailed analysis in my PowerPoint. But if I'm presenting to an executive, it needs to be brief. They are busy. Recommendations need to be crafted with a tight structure that is easily digestible at a glance. Also, be prepared to get a lot of questions. So pro tip here, have your data points memorized or easily accessible. When you're talking to executives, you may not know them as well as your peers. So this is where it's important to gain context. You need to understand what their communication style is and tailor your communication to a style that they prefer. And if you don't know, it's okay. You can go out, you can, ask their chief of staff or their assistant, or maybe people that are close to them who work with them daily. So you're going to want to find out a few things, such as, what is their background knowledge that they would have on the topic that you're going to be presenting on? What do you want them to know? And what do you want them to do with this information? Find out what they care about most. Find out, why might they resist your recommendation? Another thing that's important to know is, how formal should your presentation be? Again, it's important to understand their communication style and match it. Now, because I'm usually giving presentations using data, I need to ask myself, how familiar are they with the data I'm using? So for me, a lot of the work that I've done involves digital transformations. So I have to convince businesses they need to upgrade their technology. So I'll have to clearly and plainly state technical terms into everyday language so non-technical people can understand it. I also have to present financial information. So if a company is going to invest dollars in a new software product, they want to know their ROI, their return on investment, before they say yes to me. So I have to gather data from all over to present on financials, maybe present on operating efficiencies. And if I can't clearly make my case with data, the stakes are pretty high, right? I need their buy-in, I need their budget approval, I need to prove my return on investment. So just remember, it's not about you, it's about your audience. What do they care about? What keeps them up at night? And ask them. You've got to get inside their head, understand what they're going through, and you'll be in a much better place to start your presentation, gather the data, and frame it up for your story. Next slide, please. Which brings me to the next step in the process, which is your data point of view. So once you have all the details of your audience and you know what motivates them, and you know what keeps them up at night, you're ready to start to craft your data point of view. Your data point of view addresses the problem at its root cause, and it creates a solution with a positive outcome. Next slide. Let's dive into how to create your data point of view. First, you want to ask yourself, what actions do the audience need to do? What does the data tell us we need to do? If you've been studying and analyzing the data, you probably have some data points that are going to be worth noting and sharing. What's at stake for the organization if they do or do not adopt your data point of view? Now, what is the cost if they don't take this under consideration? You want to ask yourselves these questions, and then you want to tell your audience what needs to be done. And in order to create your data point of view, you want to have it written as one sentence. And it needs to include the final statistical outcome you desire. All right. Now that you have your data point of view written as one sentence, you're going to come up with your storyline. Next slide. So this is the fun part, right? This is the next step of the process, and this is storytelling. So if you think of your favorite book, and it doesn't even have to be a big, complex one, think of a basic children's story. They all follow the same structure. There's a beginning where you explain the incident. So this is where you think about your data point of view. You kind of set the stage, tell them what's occurring, what's the issue or the incident people need to know. This is also where you want to weave in a personal story of your own to grab your audience's attention. Don't just jump into the data. Make sure you start off with a story to engage your audience. Then we have the middle. This is the height of the story. Sometimes people refer to it as the messy middle, because this is the area where you're going to tell people what hindrances or roadblocks or obstacles that might need to be overcome on your way to getting a resolution. So now that you know the problem you have, you've done the data analysis to back it up, you've got a hypothesis about maybe what would make it better, right? There's a whole lot of stuff you have to get through to get to a resolution. That's the messy part. But then there's the ending. So this is where your data point of view sentence comes into play. This is where you tell them what is the resolution that will happen if you get through the messy middle to solve the problem. Next slide, please. So let's walk through this with an example. All right, so we've got Act 1, the beginning. With your data point of view in mind, you want to set the stage with the issue you are going to use data to investigate. So for example, if I'm rolling out a new data analytics tool across an enterprise, I might start with a story that hits on the point of something, like data in the company is fragmented and messy, difficult for our analysts to use. I might frame it up by sharing a personal story, maybe of something that happened at work. Maybe talking about a certain team or just something that occurred, something that would grab their attention. I don't want to just start off with some data points or just telling them, hey, we've got this problem, but start off with a story. Then in Act 2, we get to the messy middle. This is where the twists and the plots come into play. So this is the part that you will use the power of data storytelling to convey your message. This is where you're going to have to go out, find the data, investigate using that data that help you get to your conclusion. So in my example, I stated the problem in Act 1, then we get to the middle and I introduce the data, and I'm going to tell a story with that data to my stakeholders on what I found out and why I came to the conclusion that I did. So in my example, let's say I was looking at some data and I found out, we have 5 different tools being used at the organization. Did you know that? Each one collecting and storing data differently. And analysts are spending 2 weeks a month creating dashboards and reports, right? That's the messy middle. That's what I found out when I did data investigation. And that's going to be the messy part that we're going to have to sift through in order to get a resolution, because that's not easy to undo. All right, then we get to Act 3. This is the ending. This is where we use your data point of view sentence. So in this example, my data point of view might be something like, we need to build and implement a new data tool to improve employee efficiency by 30%, saving the company millions of dollars over the next 3 years. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, a lot can go wrong in Act 2. This is the key to getting your stakeholders to do what you want them to do, or to change your audience's mind to see things from your point of view. We need to show and tell them how you got to the conclusion in Act 3 using data. So next slide, we're going to talk about that. So this is the next step in the process, which is data visualizations. Before we dive into data visualizations, I want to mention one thing. One mistake I often see others do, and I've been guilty of doing it myself, is just handing over a dashboard, right? We're busy. We have the data together already. It's packaged up and nice and neat, and we'll just ship it off to our audience ahead of time. Or maybe we'll flash it up during our presentation. Don't do that. If we leave it up to our audience to interpret the data, a couple of things can happen. One, they interpret it incorrectly. 2, we leave them confused because maybe it's overwhelming or it's just confusing. And 3, we oftentimes lose our audience's attention, and they're not going to listen to what you are saying or telling them, which might be some really important facts that they need to know, because now they're sitting and staring at your dashboard trying to figure out what they should be looking at. We don't want to do that. A dashboard does not replace your data story. Dashboards are great as a starting point for analysts to monitor a collection of KPIs. But when you're giving a presentation with data and you're trying to make a point, we want our data point of view to be known, and we want it to stand out. So next slide, please. Let's take a look at a few examples of a dashboard. All right, so in dashboards, there's a lot going on all at once. It's interactive. You can click on the various centers across the top, right? That's the chart on the left here. There are colors and keys that you have to interpret. It's a great collection of KPIs that make it nice for an analyst or a manager maybe to keep a pulse on things that they have to monitor. However, when you are giving a presentation on data, you want to inspire action. So how can we go from a dashboard on the left to a story? You want to drive meaningful change, right? So it's usually more effective to craft a separate presentation specific to the story you want to tell. Create a presentation slide tailored to your audience that delivers the findings in a way that will resonate with them and frees us from having to compete for our audience's attention with unrelated charts, filters, or text. Next slide, please. It may seem like a giant leap going from the storyline, your data point of view, your data analysis charts and graphs to well-designed slides, but the hard part is done. Getting all of that data and storyline together really is the hard part. So let's break the creation of slides into two steps. We have words and we have data. You first want to say it with words. Just say it out loud. What do you want your audience to know? If you look at the left, the headline there says workforce, full-time employees by project. But on the right, you have something you want your audience to know, which is more funding is needed to complete projects on time. They can clearly see that and at a glance know what's going on. So when you say it with words and you use the data, this step is really most productive because the final slides begin to take shape. So one way to do that is by mapping out the main data points of your story, or what are the main storylines, and make each of them an individual slide. More specifically, have each of your main thoughts within your story become the slide title that fits on a single line. Another key tactic to use is to bold your key phrases and takeaways. So you can see on this slide how we have two bold headlines with text below it that are, one's in orange, and it's clear what you want your audience to know and take away. And if you're talking to a busy executive, they can look at this and glance their eyes at it and know what's going on in 30 seconds versus when you look at the chart on the left, that could take somebody 20 to 30 minutes to digest and interpret. Next slide, please. All right, making your point clear. So when you fail to explicitly state the purpose of your communication, you run the risk of that important piece being lost, right? That important insight. Or someone may arrive at the wrong conclusion. But when you explicitly include your takeaways and your recommendations in your slide, your audience doesn't have to guess at what they're seeing. So when the words and the pictures support one another, it's an extremely powerful combination, not only to increase understanding, but also to elevate the likelihood that your audience will remember and be able to recall the message you deliver. So if you look at the left, there's a lot of colors going on. There's a lot of numbers being shown. There's a couple of, great arrows that are pointing out some stuff, but it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. When you look at the right, you see your main point as your headline, consumer behavior has shifted, and you've got some text along with your data visualization. Let's go to the next slide. One last thing I want to mention when we're talking about data visualization, keeping it simple and uncluttered. This is a really hard thing to do, especially for analysts, because we love the numbers, we love the data. You want to resist the urge to pack everything into one graph. Look how cluttered and full of numbers that is on the left. That is fine to look at if you're a data analyst, but if we showed that to a busy executive, we're going to lose them. So when we attempt to answer too many questions in a single visual, we end up not answering any single question as effectively as we could. However, if you look at the right, if we break things up into separate graphs and use words with our data, it will be more effective. When we use multiple graphs, we can tie the text visually to the data, as you can see there. And when you do that, along with developing a narrative story, it works well for, a live presentation that you may give, and it works well for a leave behind if you have to email your PowerPoint slides to others who maybe missed your presentation, right? So they can just look at that, they can read the text, they know what you were trying to convey, versus on the left, there's just so much going on, you wouldn't really know what you're supposed to take away from that. And we could spend hours and hours going through data visualizations, and there's, books on it. But those are some of the key points that I wanted to cover tonight. Next slide, please. All right, now you're ready to deliver. So you've got your slides prepared, you've got your storyline down, you've got your slides to support your data point of view. But before you give your presentation to a live audience, you want to first get feedback. And this is, one thing that's often overlooked, and I'm guilty of it. I know we're all busy and it takes time, right? Our days get busy. For me, my days are back-to-back meetings from 8 until 5. So if I don't schedule in a meeting with my colleagues or my manager to review my presentations with them beforehand, it won't happen. So it's up to me, and it's going to be up to you to make the time to get people's feedback. Get on their calendars, get multiple points of view if you can, get feedback from someone who is close to your stakeholder that you're going to try and persuade. For example, I've had to present many times to our chief technology officer to get approval and buy-in for a new technology product initiative. Before I would meet with him, I would meet with his chief of staff or the people on his team to, one, get context and help with presentation to know what he cares about, and then two, go back and meet with that person again. So let's say it was their chief of staff, right? Go back, meet with that chief of staff, get their feedback and see if I'm on the right track, or see if my message needs to get tweaked, or if I'm missing something entirely. Oftentimes what will happen is that something in their world has changed from the time I started my presentation to when I'm giving my presentation, or started my preparation for that presentation to the time that I'm actually going to deliver it. And I'll have to change my message. Their priorities change quick. Someone may have moved onto a new position, maybe their priorities changed, whatever it is, something will have changed. This will mean you have to pivot to change your message. If you don't schedule that meeting in for feedback, you would have, in my case, I would have walked into that meeting and the message wouldn't have resonated because I would be 3 weeks behind of what happened in their world, and I wouldn't have known what was really going on in their heads at that moment in time. So know that executives' lives change fast, and it's really key to going back and getting the feedback. The second thing I'll mention is, you may believe that just because you created the content, you already know how to talk through it. With that said, don't let the first time you talk through your work be in front of your audience. Even a single practice run goes a long way in building confidence. and spotting minor mistakes and allows you to refine your message. There are lots of ways to practice, but I have found that saying it out loud works best. It can be in front of your dog. It could be in front of a mirror. Maybe you sit in front of your computer, simulating what it would be like in real life if you were doing it at a computer. If I'm giving a presentation in person at a podium, I would stand up and practice like I'm at a podium. So back in the day when we all worked at offices in person, I would actually go into the meeting room that I was going to be presenting in and make sure the equipment worked. And I would stand at the podium to know my environment. So nowadays, everything is Zoom meetings or Teams. So I tend to practice at my laptop. Next slide, please. So those are some of the key points that I would want you to know going through presenting with data. So one, know your audience. Create your data point of view, right? Just that one sentence. Create your storyline, and you're going to visualize it, and you're able to then put it all together and then practice. So that's all I have tonight. I will end there, and we can open it up for questions. I'm looking at the chat, seeing if we have anything. Any questions from anyone in the audience?
We have one question available. I don't know if you can see it, but they asked, are there prerequisites for becoming a data analyst?
It's a good question. I mean, not officially, no, but sometimes it happens in someone's career as they progress, and they're maybe already in a position where they're working with data and they're just getting familiar with it and they know it. I would say, really, there's a lot of there's a lot of programs out there. One that we offer, at St. Mary's, I'm thinking of, data analytics courses and programs in that way. But there's also, videos you could watch online. There are books you could read if you wanted to get better at it. And then the best part, or the best way that I've found people to become better data analysts is really to just work with the data and practice and just get used to doing it. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. That would be my advice.
So we have another question. When presenting to an executive, how do you know how much data is too much data? Do some leaders want more data, some less?
Great question. Yes, and yes. So I would say it depends. And that's where it's really helpful to gain context, right? So go out before you present to that executive, go and speak with somebody on their team, maybe their chief of staff, maybe somebody who works closely with them, and find out what they like and what they prefer. I have found, I had a chief marketing officer that I worked with. He loved data. He wanted to get into the data, and he would look through every Excel line by line because that's what he wanted. That's what he liked. And then I've had others who don't. They just want to look at something, glance at it quickly and move on. So it's really important to go through that first step of the process to understand your audience, understand what that key individual likes, what their communication style is, and then tailor your presentation from there.
We have one more. Gina, is there a typical amount of time a graphic and text should take for a reader to consume, either in a presentation or report or summary? For example, complicated figures and or lengthy text support can be a great way to lose a reader.
Yeah, I would say if you think back to some of the examples that I shared, I would say just one or two sentences along with the graph that you just want to make the point, right? So don't include all the text, or excuse me, don't include all the data and everything from, um, maybe a bar chart or a line graph. Just include the one or two things that you need them to know, and then put those main points in just one or two sentences. I would keep it brief. Anything else?
No questions currently. Is there any more questions for Gina?
Okay.
It looks like there are no more questions for me.
Okay.
Oh wait, one more thing.
Wonderful.
Um, I actually completed the BA certificate already after my MBA and not sure what the BA job out there I can apply for, as they all required prior experience, which I don't think I have because prior to that I was working in a lab.
Was there a question on the first part? I think I missed it.
No, I don't think there was a question. I think it's a statement more so, maybe advice in general. They stated, I actually completed the BA certificate already after my MBA and not sure what BA job out there I can apply for, as they all required prior experience, which I don't think I have because prior to that I was working in a lab.
Okay, so BA business analyst. I would, yeah, without knowing, the specifics. I mean, I would utilize if you have any school examples, like assignment examples that you could use in your resume for applying for jobs, and like be specific. What I tell people when they're looking to apply to a job, look at what they're looking for, what's in the job description, find something in your background, whether maybe it was a homework assignment or a project that you did, and try to use the same language that matches what they're looking for. And I think those are great examples to use. So even if you haven't done it in, you know, your job for a while, I think pulling out those examples are really good. The second thing I would say is if there are things with your lab job that you could pull out that were, ways in which you used data. Maybe it wasn't your primary responsibility, but maybe you still had to think about data, maybe think about analysis, maybe put um, Excel spreadsheets together or anything like that. Make sure you call those out because those will be really helpful. And then, secondly, our third um, suggestion would be, if you're still in that lab job, or if you're in any job and you're looking to, move into data analysis or a business analytics role, you could volunteer to take on some of those responsibilities, even if it's not part of your current job that you have right now. If there are things that you could just take on and bring it on upon yourself to just start to do some of those things, that would be a great way to gain that experience.
Another one. Have you ever presented to an executive and they said no? How did that go, if so?
Yes, I have. Usually it would say, usually they come back with a lot of questions, and they might not initially say, yeah, thumbs up, here you go do this project. But they may come back and say, yeah, I don't know, maybe right now is not the right time, or, I really want to know about X, Y, and Z more. And then I have to go back, find those data points, and then come back and present again. So yes, it definitely happens. But it's usually, they'll give you another, it's usually because they ask questions and they want more information before they're willing to say yes. So it's just a matter of getting those questions, taking that back, going through the whole process again, and then presenting to them again.
Okay, so we have another one, and it's asking, preparing presentations to stakeholders, how do you know that your presentation will actually stand out?
That's a great question. I mean, ahead of time, I guess hopefully when you went through the process of getting the feedback, you would be able to say, like, all right, this is good. It's gonna stick with my audience. It's gonna resonate with them. And then sometimes during the presentation, you'll be able to tell right away, at least, if you're doing it in person, or if you're in a situation where everybody has their camera on, you'll be able to tell by their body language if they are into it or not. If people are, sitting there scrolling through their phones and not paying attention, the presentation probably wasn't great, or isn't going well, or it's just not sticking with them. They're not interested. So that's kind of during, and then sometimes you'll find out after. You may get feedback afterwards from people that were there, and maybe they will, give you some feedback that maybe the presentation just didn't stick with them. Great question.
Any more questions for Gina? We have another one. So someone asked, most BA jobs sometimes require deep knowledge of Tableau, Power BI, or Damo. Sorry if I just did that. I learned Tableau in school during doing the grad certificate. How can I know if that will be enough experience or leverage to get the job?
Couple of things. Like, one, you just make sure that it's stated clearly on your resume with specific, examples, if you can, around that. Or if, you have the interview, make sure you give specific examples. Second would be, you could create a portfolio if you have Tableau dashboards that you're able to share. I know sometimes there's sensitive data and information that can't be shared, but if you're able to maybe just go out on your own, find some sample data online. There's lots of sites that have public data that you can use. Start to create some really nice dashboards or charts and graphs, and create your own portfolio that you could share with the recruiter or the hiring manager. I've seen some people, they put together a portfolio website, or maybe a link on their LinkedIn profile where you could go and check out their work. So I think that's great, having those certificates. That usually is enough. And if you have samples that you can share to show the work that you've done, that is even better.
Awesome. Someone says thank you. And we have another further question. How do you ensure the accuracy and integrity of the data you work with and present to others? Or how do you convince who you're presenting to the integrity of what you are presenting?
Great question. And I will often get asked when I am sharing data in presentations, I will get asked by many people in there, where did you get the data from? Like, how did you find that, right? They want to know, like, is this a trustworthy source? So what I will usually do is I'll have in my appendix, and even sometimes if it's a graph or something, I might put underneath it the source of where I got it with the dates and the timeline, so everything is really clear if it's not apparent right away. And then having an appendix with the data and the source that you got it from. And when you're working in a large company, usually the data is just, I would say it's usually trusted, right? It's the data that your whole company uses. There's usually a data lake or some sort of database that everybody in the company would go to get their data. So that's often helpful versus if I just went outside and found some data elsewhere, it may not be as trustworthy. But I would say, cite your sources and know where you got your data from.
Awesome. So we have another one. Gina, do you use any generative AI for your product development?
I do not. Good question. I should, but I don't. Hopefully soon.
Any other questions for Gina? I'll just give it another minute unless there's any last question. All right, well, awesome. That will conclude our presentation today, and there's going to be a survey after this webinar ends, so please fill that out for any feedback. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at cba@smumn.edu. And thank you to our wonderful speaker. She did an amazing job, and I appreciated all the information that she spoke out tonight, and I'm sure our attendees did as well.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.